Tabletop role-playing game news or lack thereof. It's 11:31 on this, the third day of December 2024. I don't know what's going on with my voice, but I've been fighting off something for like 2 weeks, so who knows. Let's just run with it. What's up, my nerds? It's your boy, the OGGM, broadcasting from somewhere on planet Earth. And I've been so busy with post-holiday humbug and finishing up my end-of-the-year projects that I failed to notice that it was the end of the year, which means I failed to notice that somebody brought out the wheel of pointless tabletop role-playing game arguments and spun it while I wasn't looking. Now, we've already had the whole theater of the mind versus toys argument come up, and we've already have the sexist argument come up, and I guess we're going back to safety tools because I just saw that pop up again. But another one that came up that I didn't notice until just now was the old school games don't make any money argument. And this one comes up about twice a year, every year, and has pretty much for as long as I've been doing this, or for the past 10 years, and I assume it's been going on longer. As old school games don't make any money. These are the same people who want to blame everything wrong with their life because of the old school players. Like somehow the few remaining of us who are over 50 and still play the games get together every couple of months in a secret Illuminati on an island somewhere and plot and plan how to make your life miserable because we've got nothing better to do. So these same people that want to blame the OSR, the old school me, for everything that's wrong with their lives, about twice a year, every year, want to blame the tabletop role-playing game economy on the old school. And they claim that, these old school games, they don't make any money. You need to do the 5e, but that doesn't make any money either. So you just basically need to buy nothing, but everything. But you need to split that. So their argument is, that if you don't sell out to 5e, you don't make money. And that the old school games don't make money, and only 5e makes money. Now, a lot of these people are the same people who say they hate 5e and they hate Wizards of the Coast and they don't play 5e, but they need a reason to be angry. They need a reason to be relevant. They need a reason to get up on their little soapbox and go, pay attention to me. I have nothing better to contribute to the tabletop role-playing game community than hate. So I'm just going to get on my little soapbox and ring my little bell in the hopes that one person pays attention to me. So I guess in that way you did win because I am paying attention to you people, but only to prove you wrong. So once again, the argument is, as of 2024 spirals to a chaotic end, the old school made no money. OSR games made no money. Games that weren't 5e made no money in 2024. Now, let's first go, of course, to how much money 5e made Wizards of the Coast this year, as opposed to previous years. And we know because of the Q3 numbers that are publicly posted, because Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro is a publicly traded company. So if you don't believe me, you can easily look these up, that in fact, Wizards of the Coast 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons did not make any money this year. In fact, it lost money. In fact, Dungeons & Dragons print ends 2024 with a $1 billion deficit, still not being able to replace the $1 billion that they lost at the beginning of 2024. Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons & Dragons ends the year owing money. Now, people will say, but no, Wizards of the Coast showed a profit this year. Well, yeah, that's 100% true. Wizards of the Coast did show a profit this year, as long as you ignore that that's the Wizards of the Coast digital that made a profit this year. That's Wizards of the Coast Magic the Gathering made a profit this year. And it goes without saying that Magic the Gathering is going to continuously make a profit because it costs nothing to create Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is literally a license to print free money. And we already know that the digital stuff made them tons of money. D&D Online, Baldur's Gate, the video games, the whatever. Anything that is connected to D&D that makes money, that is online, that was money that Wizards of the Coast can claim they made. And since D&D falls under that, they can say, look, we made a profit. But if you break down the numbers, no, I'm sorry, Dungeons & Dragons still ended the year costing more than it made. So I guess you're referring to 5e games that aren't Dungeons and Dragons making more money than the OSR games. Well, if only there was some way to tell how much money games made this year. If only there was some, I don't know, thing. Oh, wait, what's this? There literally is. So let's just look at the Kickstarters. Now, this is not sales. This is simply Kickstarters. Who made the most money in Kickstarters this year? Well, let's see. Top 10 funded Kickstarters so far 2024 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10 non-OSR, and none of them Wizards of the Coast or 5e Directive. At number 1, we have the Brandon Sanderson role-playing game at $14 million. At number 2, we have the Terry Pratchett role-playing game at $2 million. At number 3, we have DC 20 at $2 million. At number 4, we have Adventure Time, the role-playing game at $1 million. At number 5, we have Everen's Guide to Death and Beyond, a 5e adjacent project at $1 million. We have a Field Guide to Floral Dragons at $1 million. We have Monsters of Darkham, another 5e adjacent at $1 million. We have Grim Hollow, which is another 5e adjacent at $89,000. Legends of the Mist at $800,000, and Coriolis at $600,000. So those are the top 10. Now let's look at the top 10 5e so far. The most money 5e made was $1 million. And that would be Everen's Guide to Death and Beyond, a 5e tomb in June, made $1 million plus dollars. So the most money 5th edition adjacent has made is $1 million. Now, how much money has D&D from Wizards of the Coast made? None. It ends the year with $1 billion deficit. Deficit means that's money I'm owed. D&D owes Hasbro $1 billion. It started 2024 owing us, the shareholders, and remember, I still am a shareholder, $1 billion, and it ends 2024 owing the shareholders $1 billion, as opposed to Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere role-playing game that made $14 million and owes the shareholders in Brandon Sanderson's company absolutely nothing. Because if you're a shareholder in Brandon Sanderson universe, you made money this year because Brandon Sanderson ends the year making more than he lost. He made $14 million. The OSR, old school, non-5e games average anywhere from $1 to $10 billion. Million dollars. Am I saying billion? Sorry. $1 million on Kickstarter. That's not counting sales, you know. But if we look at across the entire planet, because, oh no, shock, people shop for games outside of the United States. I don't know if you knew that. But there are gamers in Mexico and Canada and Europe and Asia and Russia and Ireland and Scotland and French Polynesia and even the International Space Station. So, yeah. All across the world, if you look at the money spent on D&D and D&D adjacent products, as opposed to, say, other games like, I don't know, Call of Cthulhu, the trend seems to show over and over and over again that while D&D does hold a stranglehold here in America, the rest of the planet is like, it's okay, but all right, I'll play some other game. I don't know, like, what voice is that? I don't know. Is that supposed to be Scottish? I don't know. You know, in Asia, they were like, D&D? No, we've got JRPGs and we've got Call of Cthulhu. We've got Fabula Ultima. Screw you, D&D. You're like the 10th selling game here. You notice that there's no Call of Cthulhu products on the shelves at Ollie's. You notice that there's no Shadowdark projects on the shelves at Ollie. Meanwhile, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro is shoveling product over to third-round retailers like Ollie's to try and make something resembling money. I noticed that the most markdowns for Black Friday were D&D products, where $80 products were being sold for $20. So you can continue to stand on your little soapbox about how the OSR doesn't make any money and it's going to fail this year and it's going to die this year. And there's all these old people who are going to shuffle off and sail west, leaving the tabletop role-playing community a better place, because now it will just be people who don't play anything other than 5e. And by anything other than 5e, I guess you mean 5e adjacent games like, Tales of the Valiant or something like that. Because we know you don't play 5e, Wizards of the Coast 5e, because you consistently inform us how much you hate Wizards of the Coast, except for that one guy. But other than that guy, most of the same people who want to blame everything that's going wrong with their life on the old school and want to say that, oh, no, the OSR, the old school, the OGL doesn't make any money, it's dying, are the same people who say, but I also hate 5th edition Wizards of the Coast. I'll never play it. I'll never give them any money. But 5th edition Wizards of the Coast makes more money than the old school, but I don't play that. So I guess what you're saying is I'll play 5th edition adjacent games like Tales from the Valiant or Shadowdark, but I won't play 5e. But 5e and 5e adjacent makes more money than the OSR, the OGL, the stuff that the OGGM makes. Even though, of course, the numbers say otherwise, that the OGL, the OSR, the old school, the indie games, the games that aren't 5e are consistently making more money than the games that are 5e across the entire planet. Because, wait, shock, I know this is a shock, but once again, D&D and tabletop role-playing games are played in other countries besides America. Yes, there are other countries besides America, and the people who live in those other countries play role-playing games, and 90% of those people who aren't here in the USA don't play D&D. They play other games. They play better games. They play games that are more popular and consistently make more money, as opposed to Wizards of the Coast, who, again, let me remind you, ends the year with Dungeons and Dragons in a billion, that's billion, not million, $1 billion deficit. So I don't know where you get this, oh, the old school doesn't make any money. Oh, the old school's all horrible, and they've been horrible for decades and decades and decades. The hobby's only 50 years old, so decades ago, the old school would have just been normal people, would just been 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, because now we're decades in the future where the 20-year-olds are now, 50, 60, 70 dead. But apparently we've been ruining the hobby for decades and decades and decades. In fact, we went back in time and ruined the hobby before it existed, so that the only thing that makes the hot money in the hobby is anything other than us, even though we are 90% of the hobby. And I guess the benchmark for what constitutes old school keeps moving, because if the people who were gaming in the 70s are now my age or older, many of whom have passed on, then that means the people in the 80s are now the old school? Or are the people who were playing in the 90s now the old school? Or you just mean anybody who wasn't playing 10 years ago is the old school? Or you just mean anybody who doesn't agree with you and plays with you is the old school? I don't know anymore. You really need to redefine what the old school means. Because most of the old school, the people that played in the 70s, the people who played before 86, are now my age or older or dead. So we're a minority, and we will continue to be dwindling off as a minority, because that's how time works. 10 years from now, there'll be less of us than there are now. In fact, there might not be any, because we'll all be like 80,000 years old for 10 years. I mean, I'll be 70. Right? So does that mean there's a new old school who is perpetuating the same level of persecution that the old school is? Is the old school now people who were playing in the 80s who weren't playing what you were playing? Or is it the people who were playing in the 90s who weren't playing what you were playing? Or is it just, again, anybody who doesn't agree with you? Is it just anybody who you're angry at and you need to get on your little soapbox to be relevant and ring your little bell and say the old school doesn't make any money and they ruin everything? Pollution, that's the old school's fault. The situation in the Middle East, that's the old school's fault. The reason why my boyfriend left me, that's the old school's fault. I've got a hangnail. That's the old school's fault. The old school doesn't make any money. Old school role-playing games don't make any money. Blah, 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 blah. Well, you don't have to believe anything I say because we know that I'm an idiot and I'm a straw man with facile, stupid arguments and I need to die a slow death. But I don't know what that is in front of me, but it certainly looks like numbers. And those numbers seem to say that no, the OSR's fine.
News from the table in the rolling waves. Dice in our hand, we're the dungeon's brave.